to talk about this evening. Taking refuge is kind of the first step on the Buddhist path. It's so we're sort of facing in the right direction, so to speak, and we have a sense of orientation. It's also a way to arouse one's intentionality and set a positive intention and kind of clarify for oneself that I am making almost a statement, of, you could almost say wholesomeness, a statement of this is what I hope to do and achieve, and this is what I'm working on, and this is my path. And it's kind of a putting your flag in the ground and saying, this is who and what I am. So we call it taking refuge. Really, when the Buddha himself in his lifetime, when people would come to him, they experienced something about him or heard about his reputation, then they came into his presence and they realized this was some kind of very special being and that they wanted to study or learn from him. He would have them what's called take refuge. So this goes all the way back to the time of the Buddha. And taking refuge, if we think, well, what does that really mean? One translation I've seen that I like is a safe harbor. So where do we find, as the Bob Dylan song goes, where do we find shelter from the storm? The storm of the world, the storm of our emotionality, the storm of our pain, our frustrations, our anguish, our anxiety, everything we carry with us day to day. Do we have a way out of that? It's should not be a hopeless situation, So refuge is an affirmation that there is a light sort of illuminating this journey of our lifetime, of our life, that there's a way to illuminate this path, or there's a light at the end of the tunnel. There's a goal, in a sense. So it comes back down to, well, then what can we rely on in this world that's so fickle, where everything changes, where there is really nothing that you can really rely on 100%? What is there? Especially when we're talking about working with our mind, to have a source of something authentic, something that we can really count on, something we can wholeheartedly trust. It's a rare thing. It's a very, very, very rare thing. And if we are on let's say the Buddhist path, we take refuge in the Buddha as a teacher, the teacher that was basically unmistaken. He was so clear and accurate and precise and fully awake. So if someone's partially awake or has some of the answers, that's probably not good enough. If we want to go to the actual end of our journey to accomplish the goal of fulfilling one's potential as a human being, of eradicating all of our sort of faults, the things that hold us back, the things that tie us in knots, the things that constrict us or slow us down or confuse us. If we want to get out of confusion, then we need a guide that is not confused. So that's the Buddha. So we take refuge in the Buddha as a being that is not going to deceive us, is not mistaken. He's not going to give us wrong ideas or views. He's not going to pull the wool over our eyes. He's capable. And an epithet of the Buddha is the capable one, and meaning he's completely capable of anything we could conceive of, really. So how rare in this world to find a perfect or a perfected human being, So in Buddhism, very important because it's not a theistic religion or philosophy. We don't consider the Buddha, let's say, a god of some sort. He's a human being subject to birth and death. But he, through his own efforts, he was able to completely wake up, completely sort of purify himself, open his mind completely, open his heart completely. He fully developed his wisdom. He fully developed his love and compassion for all beings. And so we take refuge in that. we take refuge in the Dharma, which is taking refuge in the Buddha won't do us any good. What we have to do is apply what he taught. He pointed the way. He said, you can do this. Here's what you can do, what you need to do. Here are your options. Here are different tools and methods. So that's called the Dharma. We take refuge in that as the unmistaken path. So we have the unmistaken teacher, the Buddha, the unmistaken path, the Dharma. And then we also take refuge in companions or beings who can also inspire us, that are similarly on this journey of awakening. And that's called the Sangha. We actually call it the Noble Sangha. And so that's called the threefold precious ones. We are sometimes translated as the three jewels or gems, because a jewel or a gem is something very rare and precious. So we start with this acknowledgement of the intrinsic value of these three things, the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. We take refuge in that. And in a sense, that is the entranceway, that's the on-ramp onto the Buddhist highway. So we could say it like that. So that was the prayer. It's done in the Tibetan system. It's done in the Theravadan or Thai system. It's done in the Japanese and Zen system. It's done throughout the Buddhist world, taking refuge. So it's a common starting point. So that's kind of a long answer, but it's actually a very important answer because it's actually an extremely important subject, especially for beginners, people that are new to the Buddhist path. You don't just sort of jump into the middle of it, although a lot of people do. You know, we say there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And actually that's extremely important, right? So there's it's not chaos. There's order here. There's something dignified. There's something elegant in this path because it's based on reason. It makes sense. A journey always has a beginning and then the journey itself and then the conclusion or reaching the goal. So that's what that is.
It seems like and it comes to mind for some reason. The number 3 is some kind of parallel throughout many religions and ideologies, and just thinking, you know, past, present, future, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, beginning, middle, end, Coke, Pepsi, and you know, whatever. There seems to be. Do you think there is something to the number 3? I know it might not be exactly what we're here to talk about, but just interesting.
Well, I mean, we can talk about numerology. We can say there's yes. I mean, integers and mathematics is the universe sort of follows mathematical laws and rules, so to speak. But there's, I think, almost you could say all numbers. You know, 2, 1. We could start with, or we could start with 0, and we could have a whole conversation about mathematics and the importance of numbers and the significance and the what's behind them. So I think that's not really the scope of what we're here to talk about.
It popped into my mind because I was looking and seeing the number 3 seems to pop up quite often. Well,
I will say that in the Buddha's teachings, he taught at a time when everything was memorized. You know, it was not a written school. It was oral transmission, and then remembered, and then recited and memorized. And people had very powerful sort of capabilities of memorization that I think a lot of modern people have somewhat lost, or that sort of talent or skill is atrophied a bit because we have it so easy and everything is recorded and written down and so on. So the Buddha taught in a specific way that was in accordance with ancient Indian teaching and philosophy, and things were enumerated. So you'll find in the Buddhist, especially the original sort of traditional Buddhist teachings, you'll find groups of 3 this, 6 that, 8 this. There's lots of 8s. There's lots of these things. And these were categorizations that, again, made it easy for people to remember these teachings.
Got it.
So.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit more about Dharma?
Well, Dharma has many, many meanings. So what do you want to know about Dharma?
Well, so in I guess in the beginner's perspective of the three jewels, you got Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. I think I get the premise of Buddha. I'm not sure about the other two. Maybe you can give me some insight into that.
Well, again, Dharma, you could say, is the path. It's the teachings. It's the tools, so to speak. It's the different practices. So Dharma is the body of teachings. The Buddha taught extensively. I mean, he achieved his enlightenment in his 30s. He taught till he passed away in his 80s. He traveled throughout India and taught a lot, and to lots of different people from all different walks of life. He taught the poorest of the poor, and he taught very wealthy and rich kings, and everything in between. So he kind of dispensed with the caste system of his day and said, everyone is capable. If you've got a mind, you can realize the truth of these teachings. So there was no discrimination. But because of this diversity of his audience, you could say, of his students and disciples, he taught a myriad of different techniques and different ways of understanding. And that's what Dharma is. It's this huge, vast encyclopedia of this vast ocean of different teachings that all point in different skillful ways to different aspects of the truth, to lead people in a very skillful ways, step by step, according to what their needs are. So it's very hard to pin things down and say, well, Buddhism is just this or just this. It's a very, very wide open, very skillful, very insightful and clever sort of way of leading beings to awakeness, to help them lessen their confusion and at the same time start to increase their ability to learn. So Dharma is different philosophical teachings and understandings about the nature of, let's say, reality and so on, of how the mind works. Dharma encompasses meditational techniques, all of that. It's very broad.
Gotcha.
So
when you say awake from, it's to awake from a dream, from the matrix, from what is it that we're awakening from?
it's like if you're shackled or bound up in chains, you need to have them unlocked or taken off to experience the freedom of your body and be able to do what you need or want to do or go where you want to go. We're awakening from a dream because, in a sense, the analogy is apt that when we're dreaming, we think things that are happening in the dream are really happening to us in a very immediate way, and we buy into it, right? We think,
no matter how strange it is, we buy into it.
Yeah, that's because we're confused, because we're not seeing the big picture. We're not realizing that it's a body laying in bed dreaming. And similarly, when we really wake up, we may realize that our perceptions, our understanding of the world, our the way we react to things, our emotionality, all of that stuff is based on sort of a confused basis of not seeing things clearly as they really are. So when we say awakening, it's awakening from dream, it's awakening from confusion, it's clarifying how things are. So essentially like that.
Yeah. Do you think that there's a potential to be awakened utilizing chemicals or drugs? Like can that give you glimpses into this non-sedated or non-confused state, so to speak? Not sedated, it's a confused state.
I think absolutely they can give flashes, momentary insights, an understanding or a glimpse or something that there's more than meets the eye, that there's multiple and alternative and different ways of, let's say, experiencing reality, and that reality may be malleable and isn't this fixed, solid, narrow thing that we often think of as the world. So from that standpoint, yes. I don't know that they are, if it's advisable or that they are the whole journey, but I think judiciously used, carefully, skillfully, with respect, with that they can have their place. But I don't think that they will actually lead to a full awakening that's permanent and so on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think it gets you somewhere, then you have to go take the next part of your journey.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. I've had some glimpses per se, part of my ignorance, but when was the age of the Buddha? I actually don't know when that was.
Well, he lived approximately 2,500 years ago, give or take, probably 100 years. He lived approximately 500 years BC, before, the modern era, the Christian era, as we call it. So he goes back a ways.
It was a good time.
Well, it was a simpler, maybe in some ways simpler time. People still were confused. People had the basic root confusions, which we have identically today, which is they had greediness, and they had jealousy, they had pride, they had anger, and all these kinds of things that we have. We have the same exact stuff. So yeah, they didn't have computers and internet and electricity, but they had to interact as human beings with their environment and with each other, and all that stuff that causes the human experience to be challenging. He taught to address that, and he was addressing we could say, the human condition. The human condition is still our condition today. We haven't transcended that.
Not yet. We're working on it with AI, when I was younger, I read Siddhartha. Now, have you ever read that?
Oh yes, a couple times.
What is there anything to glean out of that? In not to say that that's the story. We know that it's not the exact. I mean, I read it and enjoyed it thoroughly. I'm not sure how much that has any correlation to reality.
Very, very loosely. However, it was based on what Hermann Hesse knew of Shakyamuni Buddha's, Gautama Buddha's life, and but it's definitely a fictionalized, highly fictionalized. However, it's an incredibly beautifully told story, and I wept deeply. I cried really hard when at that last scene, and when he's sitting by the river, and basically it awakens him. And I read that before I was formally on the Buddhist path, and that was very powerful. Kind of planted a seed. So, yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that book. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead. Were you going to say something? I'm sorry.
No. I mean, I'm full of things to say, and full of, even reflecting on Hermann Hesse and that book. And it woke up, I think, a lot of people from that generation, kind of in the 60s. And then you mentioned drugs, psychedelics. Similarly, these were all things that, I don't know if you could call it a cosmic conspiracy, but some kind of convergence of synchronistic, interesting things that kind of brought us to where we are today. Very interesting times that many people have experienced. But here we are now. That's the important thing. The past is past. We don't spend too much time reminiscing and nostalgia. I'm not sure how sort of helpful the role of nostalgia is. We have to be sort of ruthlessly present.
I was going to say that's actually what that book taught me, was the being in the moment and the presence. Not that I didn't follow in terms of doing the things that I thought I should in terms of being more present, but that's what I remember getting out of it. Is that how present Siddhartha was in that book? Exactly. He was doing what he was doing in those moments.
Exactly. And like I said, Hesse just captured that that so well. And so, yeah, these are the seeds that were planted in many of our mind streams. And again, so now we're here. We don't take necessarily refuge in a book or a story or an author, but we we certainly honor the past, right? We honor all of the things that have taught us, that have led us to where we are now. So I think that's extremely, it's a beautiful thing. So I was going to say, since you're asking, and we're talking on a pretty introductory sort of basic level, and people that are watching this video, hopefully they will also be receiving this in that spirit and understanding this is really introductory kind of material to the whole huge world of Buddhist philosophy and practice. But we started with that refuge prayer. So I would say similarly, maybe one thing to talk about for a minute is the Tibetan word for a Buddhist is Nangpa. And Nangpa means, Nang means inward, inner, inside, within. So the word that Tibetans came up with to describe a Buddhist or themselves as a Buddhist culture is Nangpa, meaning people that are turning their attention inwardly. So it's kind of a contemplative, reflective, self-aware, all these connotations go with that word. Instead of being outwardly, if we think of the materialistic world, materialistic people, people that are seduced and caught up by the modern world with all the flash and glitziness and so on, the attention is always being drawn outward, seeing this and seeing that and hearing this and experiencing all these things with our senses, everything drawing us out of ourselves. And sort of the point, you could almost say, of meditation, a meditative practice and lifestyle is to become self-aware. Really what we get down to is the Buddhist path is to realize one's own potential. And we do that by really thoroughly, deeply understanding exactly who we are. And those answers only come from within. So in meditative practice, that's one of the sort of techniques we call vipassana. There's sort of this sort of self-analysis and a scrutiny. We sort of scrutinize our situation and who we are. We really question these things. And through that process, that sort of exploratory process, hopefully we come up with some insights, some actual understanding of, oh, this is, again, not something put in words necessarily, but some intimate, deep self-awareness. And that's really a big part of the path. It's not, I can't say that's everything, but that's a huge part. So Nangpa is this word that and I think that's helpful to kind of understand, well, how is a Buddhist sort of different from other, let's say, philosophical schools of, so like that. Yeah.
Yeah, most other theologies or philosophies tend to be based on some external things. Even though I don't think that a lot of them had that intention initially, it seems to have become that. And I think about the Abrahamic. I don't think that the original was meant to have an externality, even though it seems. But that's another whole path we don't need to go down. Sure. One thing that I did notice with the limited amount of meditation that I do is that thoughts are not my own. That I notice that they just sort of arise after you just paying attention. You don't really, it's like the I, the ego, whatever it is not actually coming up with the next thing that you think. Mm. It just sort of appears. It's the only thing that I don't know. I think I find that fascinating because we tend to think that we have all this control And I don't know, and I've had this discussion with Jason regarding free will and where that arises within this whole, I guess, this existence. Where is it that free will exists? I'm not certain that it does, based on just trying to pay attention to my own thoughts. Because if you don't think your own thoughts, then how could you be responsible for your actions? What are your thoughts?
Okay.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, as they say.
Sure.
I'm not even sure how to start to disentangling that. You brought up a lot of stuff there. If you want to break it down and isolate some of it, maybe we can tackle it that way. As
Sorry
they
about
say, like eating an elephant, right?
Yeah.
Apologies to all the vegetarians.
My apologies for bringing up maybe something a little bit more than introductory, but
Well, like I said, there's a lot there to tackle. I would go back to what you were saying about God. I think,
yeah.
the idea that the fundamental thing with Buddhism is it's not theistic. So it's not about external saviors and being bailed out by some higher power or something like that. It's really about pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps and leveraging your own wisdom, in a sense.